In the 1920s, Hungary found itself facing a whole new world. The great Austro-Hungarian Empire had crumbled in the wake of World War I, and with it, Hungary's power and influence were drastically reduced. The Treaty of Trianon, signed in 1920, didn't just end the war for Hungary, it reshaped the country in ways it's still grappling with today. Hungary lost about 2/3 of its territory, including vital agricultural and industrial land, along with important natural resources. But despite all that, Hungary was still a strong agricultural producer. They were known for their grains, livestock, and wines, and these exports made up a significant chunk of their economy. The industrial side of things was a bit more complicated. Hungary had a manufacturing base, but it was nowhere near as advanced as the Western European nations. They were still recovering from the war's impact, facing high inflation, war debts, and economic instability. By the end of the decade, though, Hungary began to stabilize under the leadership of Miklos Horthy, who came to power in 1920. Horthy's government was conservative, nationalistic, and focused on restoring Hungary's lost glory. But, let's be real, it wasn't easy. Hungary was still struggling with the aftermath of losing its empire, and politically, the country was in turmoil. There were uprisings, revolutions, and a general feeling of chaos that made the 1920s a tough decade for the Hungarians. Still, despite the economic and political instability, Hungary was making moves in other areas, like innovation and technology. Hungary wasn't exactly a tech giant in the 1920s, but it had its fair share of clever advancements. Agriculture was a big part of this, with Hungary pushing forward in areas like irrigation and farming machinery. Budapest became an intellectual hub, especially for scientists working in fields like medicine, physics, and engineering. You might not know this, but one of the most famous Hungarian inventors, Laszlo József Bíró, actually invented the ballpoint pen in 1938. Sure, that's just outside the 1920s, but it gives you a taste of Hungary's creative ingenuity during this period. The manufacturing sector, though, was still a little behind the times, using older techniques, especially compared to countries like Germany or the UK. On the political front, Hungary was a bit of a mess, but also very determined. Miklos Horthy, who became the country's regent after the fall of the monarchy, governed with a strong nationalist agenda. His goal? To undo the damage of the Treaty of Trianon and restore Hungary's lost territories. But the 1920s weren't just about political restoration. There were growing tensions within the country and across Europe. Extremist groups started to rise, and Hungary was no stranger to fascism and ultranationalism. They had growing conflicts with their neighboring countries like Romania, Czechoslovakia, and Austria, while also making secretive alliances with Italy and Germany. Hungary was starting to make moves, but the country was still politically unstable. As for the military, Hungary faced some pretty harsh restrictions from the Treaty of Trianon. The size of their army was capped at just 35,000 men, which was a fraction of what it had been during the days of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But, like the resourceful nation it was, Hungary worked on modernizing its military. They focused on smaller, well-trained units, and their weapons were mostly based on older Austro-Hungarian designs. Despite the limited military size, Hungary was still preparing for internal threats rather than international wars. The focus was on guarding their borders and putting down domestic uprisings, especially as tensions with left-wing movements grew. Now, let's talk about the people, because the 1920s were a time of major change for Hungarian society. The majority of the population still lived in rural areas, but Budapest was seeing urbanization, especially as the country started industrializing. Social life was marked by a deep sense of trauma, nationalism, and nostalgia for the glory days before the war. People were angry about the loss of territory and felt it was an injustice that needed to be fixed. On the other hand, there was also a lot of political polarization. Monarchists, conservatives, and left-wing movements were all at odds. The working class was struggling too, and strikes became common as people demanded better conditions. And then there was the Jewish population, who played a huge role in Hungary's culture and economy, but who also faced rising anti-Semitism, especially from the more nationalist factions. When it came to healthcare and welfare, Hungary was still in the early stages of developing these systems. The country's healthcare infrastructure wasn't exactly advanced, especially outside of Budapest. Most rural areas had limited access to medical care, and welfare programs were far from what we might consider standard today. Still, Hungary did provide some social services for war veterans and their families. Poverty was widespread, especially in rural areas, and people were struggling. The standard of living did improve slightly toward the end of the decade, but inequalities persisted. As for ethnicity, Hungary was a nation deeply affected by the Treaty of Trianon. With much of its ethnic diversity now living in neighboring countries, the Hungarian population remained the majority, but tensions with ethnic minorities were high. This included Romanians, Slovaks, Croats, Serbs, and Germans, who were now outside Hungary's borders. Within Hungary itself, the Jewish community played an influential role, especially in the intellectual and business sectors, but they also faced increased anti-Semitic sentiments. The nationalist policies pushed by Horthy's regime promoted Hungarian dominance, and these tensions only grew as the 1920s went on. During this time, there were some figures that stood out in Hungarian history. Miklos Horthy, of course, was one of the most significant. His leadership helped guide Hungary through a turbulent decade. There was also István Bethlen, who served as prime minister for most of the decade and played a crucial role in stabilizing the country politically and economically. In the cultural scene, Hungary had some major intellectual and artistic figures, though many of the most famous, like poet Sándor Petőfi, had passed before the 1920s. But even still, Hungarian Jews were having a huge influence in shaping Hungary's culture and economy, particularly in business and finance. But let's not forget about the darker side of Hungarian life during this time. Hungary wasn't immune to crime and underground movements. There were secret societies with nationalist or anti-communist leanings, and political violence wasn't exactly uncommon. The rise of fascist movements, like the Aerocross Party, was starting to pick up speed in the 1920s, though they would become more prominent in the following decades. There were also communist and left-wing underground movements working against Horthy's government. But in general, Hungary's crime and political violence was not as extreme as in some other European countries at the time. Despite all the turmoil, Hungary was still a nation with a rich cultural life. Budapest became a center for the arts. Music, literature, and cinema were thriving. Hungary's contributions to classical music were significant, with composers like Béla Bartók and Zoltán Kodály leading the way. Hungarian literature, too, reflected the national struggle, focusing on themes of loss, recovery, and national identity. Hungarian art was influenced by movements like Art Nouveau, especially in architecture and design, making the city of Budapest a beautiful and intellectual place to be. Religion played a big role in Hungary, with the Catholic Church holding significant sway in both cultural and political life. Protestants were also present, especially among minority groups living outside the country, and the Jewish community was large and influential. But, as you might expect, the rise of nationalism meant that anti-Semitic sentiments were also on the rise, making life increasingly difficult for Hungary's Jewish population. Hungary was also seeing a bit of a mysticism and occultism trend, influenced by broader European trends, though this didn't become a massive movement by any means. And of course, Hungary had its rich folklore, filled with legends of elves, witches, and vampires. Hungarian mythology played a huge role in shaping the national identity, and these stories were deeply rooted in the country's past struggles and triumphs. The tales of the Tündér, fairies, and the vampire legends are still with us today, influencing not just Hungary, but global pop culture. All of this culminated in the Treaty of Trianon in 1920, a moment that forever shaped Hungary's destiny. The loss of territory and the national trauma that came with it shaped Hungary's path forward, setting the stage for the rise of nationalism, political unrest, and a nation desperately trying to reclaim its former glory. So, what can we take away from Hungary in the 1920s? Well, it was a nation marked by struggle, pride, and a drive to restore what was lost. The decade was filled with social, political, and cultural upheaval, but also innovation, resilience, and a fierce desire to find its place in a changing world. Hungary's 1920s were a time of both sorrow and strength, a nation in transition, but never giving up on its future. Thanks for tuning in to The World as We Know It and joining me in another chapter of world history. As always, there are more detailed notes in the description, and we welcome any requests or recommendations in the comments section. If you found this video helpful, entertaining, or educational, please consider liking this video and subscribing to support our channel. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next video.